I think we're just not going to worry about it because I was having trouble finding it. So welcome. It's great to have you all with me. This is Joyce Graff. I'm with The Powerful Patient, and today we're going to talk about education for visually impaired young people. And we have with us Sue Buckley from Knoxville that you met on our last session. And we also have Liza Rutherford and her daughter Campbell from Knoxville also. Is that right, Liza?
Actually, we're from Dandridge. We're about 40 miles east of Knoxville.
Great. So tell us your story. I understand that Campbell is a wonderful student. And tell us what challenges you've been working with since March, since COVID hit us.
Well, we're homeschoolers already, so I would think that we have a few less challenges than some people with the transition anyway, because we've been fighting this battle for a long time. But we started homeschooling when Campbell was 10 years old. The year after, at the end of her 4th grade year, her teacher for the visually impaired moved to Nashville to live full time. And so she was just contracted from the School for the Blind to come once a week anyway. So at that point, she wasn't going to even be doing that. And so Campbell wouldn't have any services, and the district couldn't find a teacher for the visually impaired. So their suggestion was that I send her to the School for the Blind. And the way that works is they ship them there on Sundays and they live there all week and then come home on Fridays. And I wasn't okay with sending my 10-year-old to live somewhere else. So we talked to the director of special education and said, hey, can we just compromise here and maybe try homeschooling until you find someone? If you will provide Braille books for us and technology, because there's no access basically for homeschool moms to get that kind of stuff for blind students. So if I wanted to, like for my sighted daughter, I have hundreds of homeschool curricula to choose from. But for Campbell, it's not available in Braille. So we worked with the school system, and there's a wonderful lady at the district who will check the resource center, and I'll just tell her what subjects I'm going to do, and she'll order the books in Braille. And typically we only do math and science in Braille just because the massive size of these books takes up half my house. So, and then we try to do everything else digitally.
Yeah. Even now, I kind of do dual digital and Braille with math and science. So I have the math and science textbooks in Braille, but I also usually find them on Bookshare and download them on my computer so that I can read the text parts of it with JAWS a bit faster than I could read the Braille. And then when I get to equations and graphs and things like that, I use the Braille text to, read those. And then I output all of my math and science content at this point on the computer.
Great. Let me just back up a second and clarify for people who are listening who may not understand these terms. You mentioned that Braille books are big. I know your average textbook, let's say a 300 or 400 page book, turns into what, 8 volumes of Braille, and they're about 12 by 12 by 4 inches?
It can, and then when you get into textbooks, especially those with graphs, the number of volumes goes way up. Like my calculus book right now has 36 volumes, and that's the smallest Braille math textbook that we've had. I think the largest was my geometry textbook, which had 110 volumes. So
36 volumes of Braille is approximately what, 12 feet high?
Well, we have these cubes that you can see behind Campbell all over, and they're the perfect size for the Braille books. They're like 12 by 13 cubes, and so we have them, and we have them in the garage. We just have a system now. We've been doing it so long, but I don't know what they do with them in public school. I mean, what do the kids do? I mean, I guess they just take the one volume they're using, but where the school puts the rest of them, I have no idea.
Yeah,
right.
I just remember having to carry around Braille textbooks when I was little. And when you're little, I don't even think you have as many textbooks as you do in high school. And even then, my backpack was always ridiculously heavy. And then I'd carry around the 8-pound Braille writer. So it
She had
was
big
a lot.
muscles.
She could definitely hurt somebody with her backpack. Just saying.
Yes, I could.
Yes.
And then you mentioned downloading books and reading them with JAWS. So if you take an electronic copy of a book and download it to your computer, then you can use a text-to-speech reader. And JAWS is one of the text-to-speech readers that also helps you navigate the pages on the computer, right? So tell us a little bit more about that.
So as she said, JAWS is a screen reader for Windows computers. It stands for Job Access with Speech. I think it's probably one of the most popular screen readers right now for Windows computers. And you use keyboard commands to navigate the computer. You cannot use a mouse with JAWS effectively. So you use keyboard commands to do everything you would normally do with a mouse. And JAWS speaks everything that's on your screen, in addition to a few other things that it might not speak for sighted people, or that may not be text for sighted people. For example, if you're on a website in Google Chrome, you may notice as a sighted person that there's a menu. It has 3 vertically aligned dots. Well, that menu in JAWS is called the Chrome button menu, but sighted people don't see that. They just see the 3 little dots. So that's what I hear all the time when sighted people want me to go there.
The 3 dots, Campbell. And she's like, what 3 dots?
Yeah, so for sighted people, if you picture yourself in front of a computer screen and close your eyes, and now you have to figure out where in the heck they put the button. So the JAWS is helping you navigate north, south, east, west. Well, more or less, how does that work?
It depends on what environment you're in. So if you're on a web page, there are lots of different commands that you can use to get to different elements of that web page. For example, you can use your insert key and F7 to get to your links list, which is just a list of all the links on the page. And then if you're just on the web page, you can use the letter H to navigate by heading, the letter B to navigate to different buttons. X is for checkboxes, R is for regions, which that's actually something that I think is unique to screen readers. It just kind of divides the page into larger sections. So there'll be like a navigation region where your menu buttons and links are, and then there'll be your main region where your main content can be found. And so you can just use some shortcut keys that are typically, when you're navigating on web pages, they're specific to JAWS, that the shortcut keys that you would use, or to screen readers in general. And then, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Joyce, I will say that Campbell is pretty speedy with her use of JAWS. You know, she mentioned insert F7, where you line up all the links, and then you can jump by like first letter navigation. So hit C and go to the first, place that's C, if you know what link you're looking for on that web page. So she's very fast. And if you ever see a demo of someone who's a really good user of a screen reader, they are very fast, actually quicker probably than someone using a mouse and using vision and locating something on the screen.
Right. So it used to be that we had to type a line at a time and give a command and stuff like that. We don't do that anymore. We orient ourselves more and more visually, and most of the computer interfaces have become very visual, which makes it more challenging for somebody who's trying to navigate that screen and say, where in the heck do they put the right button? So, so clearly you've learned how to do that. Would you say that you do the same kinds of things that your sister does or that your peers are doing with a computer? How accessible is computing for you?
If you know the right keyboard commands, then most of the time it is pretty accessible. But you have to know the right keyboard commands. So I did have to receive training by specialized assistive technology instructors in order to learn to navigate the computer with JAWS. And the thing is, a lot of these shortcut keys are usable by sighted people as well. They're not unique to screen readers. So most of the time, things tend to be fairly accessible. You will run into websites where there's a lot of graphics and it's not organized well. And so it becomes a bit more difficult to navigate. But if you're patient with it, you can typically either find ways to get around the website being accessible, or you can figure out the layout of the website and use it. Now, when it comes to academic material, I think when it comes to reading math and science content on the computer, there are still some efforts being made to try to make that accessible. I typically get all of my STEM subjects in Braille, as we already discussed. But when I'm in college, I may not have that option. And so I will probably end up reading my math content on the computer with my Braille display. And so in that case, I may run into some things that aren't as accessible as they would be to my sighted peers.
So, for example, I'm thinking of an algebra textbook, and you go, the text is fine, the word problems are fine, and then you get to these equations. And in Braille, there's a special code for writing equations in Braille.
Yes.
But for that to go text to speech, it sounds like it's probably going to be pretty badly garbled.
Sometimes it depends on what code the producers of the textbooks used. So I think there's a code or a program called MathML, which enables NVDA and JAWS to read Braille, or not Braille, to read math content on the computer. And there's a code called LaTeX that you can use to actually input math into a text editor like Word, and use a toggle command, and it comes out perfectly with a screen reader and in Braille and visually. So sometimes it's inaccessible, like if the code is, or if the math is in a picture or a graphic, that's when it can be really inaccessible. Or if you've got a bunch of special characters that you're trying to do and you're not using a code that JAWS or NVDA would recognize when they're trying to read math content.
And
Right.
something encouraging that I've learned since March. Several of my best friends are educators, and of course they've been right alongside us through this whole deal with Campbell. We had to really battle to get technology training for her, and thankfully she had it. I mean, it's just now been about a year that she's had training. It was neglected until high school. But one of my friends teaches history, and she had to go in, of course, because they're thinking everything's going to be virtual, and create her history course in Canvas. That's the one that our school district uses. And so when she would post something like an assignment, it would bring up 12 warnings, like this is not accessible. Canvas would bring up a notification to her and tell her that this is not accessible. Would you like us to fix it? You click this button and we'll fix it for you. And so she was screenshotting all of this and sending it to me, and she's like, I don't understand why this isn't accessible. And I was like, it's because you have that little cartoon up in the corner of a man digging a hole with a shovel, and he didn't describe it. So you've got to, and there were these things that she just didn't think about that weren't accessible. And she doesn't even have a blind student in her classroom, but Canvas is, I don't know if all of them have done this, all these learning platforms that people are using, but it was encouraging to me that Canvas was catching those and encouraging the teachers to go in and fix them.
Right. And one of the things that is, whenever you put a picture on a website, for example, there's an option that's not always right in your face, but there is an option for every picture to put what's called alt text, I mean, alternate text. So if you can't see the picture, what should we say here? What should your screen reader say to you? There's a little man digging a hole to say this is under construction.
Right.
You know, if you just put a little phrase in that alt text and tell the screen reader what to say about it, then you've really done a wonderful favor for the people who are trying to read it with a screen reader.
Joyce, I might add that they really do need to think when they start creating the alt text though, or alt tags, because some people write, they good intentions, but some of the things they write do not tell you, when you don't have your eyes being able to use it, what that even really is. I mean, you know, short and sweet, what is it and how does it relate to maybe what I'm looking at? So, you know, a man digging a hole, but what you said was under construction. I like that.
Right.
You know, a
Yeah.
man digging a hole, this page is under construction. Or, you know, so that way we can relate to, why is there a man digging a hole in this page? You know, so I just really would say to the viewers of this podcast that, you know, think if you're going to write an alt text, which we would love for you to have, what is it really you're describing?
Right. What's the import of this picture that you need to convey to a person who can't see the picture? That's
Right.
the bottom line. The other thing I wanted to just clarify is NVDA stands for?
Non-visual desktop access. It's another screen reader that's similar to JAWS, but it's open source, so it's free, and so it's a good option for those who may not have access to JAWS. And if for some reason your JAWS is not working, then you can use NVDA as a backup if necessary. And it also has the nice feature of being able to put it on a flash drive and use it in computers that are not your own, which, as to my knowledge, JAWS does not have that kind of feature. So
That's a nice bonus feature. The
yeah,
other thing we should say is that the Apple Macintosh has a very good accessibility that's built into it. So if you were buying a computer for a high schooler, what computer would you recommend people get and learn to use well?
I would recommend some sort of Windows PC, because that is most likely what you're going to be using in the workplace. A Mac is good, I think, for like mixing music and graphic designing, stuff like that.
Right.
But when you're considering the jobs that you're going to typically do in the workforce, especially when you're thinking of math and science careers, it's most likely going to be a Windows computer that's going to get you the furthest. And you may, you know, get a Braille display like I have to pair with it, so that you can have the Braille right there when you're, you know, when you're working with your computer and your screen reader.
And I will say that, you know, I was talking about that Campbell's only had this training for about a year, and we had to, she wants to study math. She wants to major in math or biostatistics or something like that, and considered engineering for a while. And because Apple is so user-friendly and accessible, that seems to be sort of a crutch that the school systems are, and the TVIs, and the same thing for note takers. You know, they're kind of like a tablet with a Braille display that students use lots of times in elementary school. And I think that's great for elementary school, just like I would put my sighted daughter on an iPad before I would put her on a laptop, you know, to learn technology. But then I feel like it kind of becomes a crutch. And the reality of the situation is, in your workplace, you're not going to be using an iPad, or likely not even a Mac, unless you're in some sort of artsy type of technology job. So we had to keep pushing and say, you know, Campbell, and finally they just decided that she's so unique in the fact that she wants to study STEM, that she needed this training to learn to use a computer, a regular Windows-based computer. But that's not the case at all. All these, now we know since March, that all these students needed to know how to do these things so they could access online classes. I mean, Campbell's she's dual enrolling this semester at Pella City State, and she's taking a Spanish class, and it's all online with Zoom and things like that. So if she hadn't had this training a year ago, she wouldn't have had any of this access, you know. And it's not, Spanish isn't STEM related. It's just a humanities class that everybody has.
Right.
Joyce, I might add that what Liza says is so important with COVID right now, because when everybody went into crisis mode back in March and schools were closing down after spring break or not coming back, the first thing is, you know, how do you, as a blind student who's now at home, not with your teacher, the visually impaired, how are you going to access if you just have a note taker, a Braille note taker? They do not go online and do Zoom. There's no apps like that. So you as a blind student are really different. You're not with your peers with the material. Your teacher, the visually impaired, is really helpless to get you back accessible into the classroom, say to an English or a math class with your peers in high school or even junior high for that matter. So what COVID has done is in many ways very positive for blind and visually impaired right now, I think because it has made the teachers aware that in the future, this is not a transition thing to wait till they're a junior or senior in high school. Now is the time when their peers are learning, 3rd grade, 4th grade, whenever, get their hands on a computer, learn the keyboard. You know, when I was learning keyboard, they didn't want you to look at your hands anyway, even if you're sighted when you're learning keyboarding. So let the blind student be equal to the peer on a computer. And that way, when there was the crisis mode, you know, we teach them Zoom and all of a sudden they're right in there with their peers in the same classroom. Like we're on this podcast with you.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is that translates beyond school to applying for jobs. Obviously, I'm still in school, so I don't necessarily have personal experience with this, but from everything that I've heard from other blind and visually impaired individuals, you want as few accommodations that would set you apart from your coworkers as possible, because when you are looking at a prospective job and your boss or manager is reviewing the applicants for that job, it's only reasonable that they may not choose the person who requires extra accommodations. So you need to be sure that you have as few things setting you apart from your sighted peers when it comes to technology and other accommodations as possible. There are some things that are, you know, kind of unavoidable, like screen readers, but
you don't want to be the one that goes in and says, I can only use a Mac.
Yeah.
And the whole office is on PCs. You know?
Right.
Or I need to use a Braille note taker and they do not even know what that is.
Right.
I mean,
and then the IT people wouldn't be able to help you if you were having any issues, if you were using a Braille note taker or something like that.
Yeah.
Good point. And they probably have security concerns if they're plugging in some other aberrant device.
Yes.
Joyce, I also would say within the school system, the teachers of the visually impaired, their job is to make things accessible, materials accessible for the students that are their caseloads, that are legally blind, low vision or no vision, but they have so much on their plate already to make either Braille copies and large print, whatever. One more thing to add to the student's plate is really not necessary. So I advocate for like Braille note takers. I'm not against Braille. I'm against Braille note takers when they get older, because a lot of times, as Liza said, that's a crutch to the school. Well, they already know how in, you know, elementary school to use a Braille note taker, but let's just let them keep using that. No, they need to advance.
This is a specialized device that's not like, it's not a regular PC or anything at all. It's a specialized hardware piece. And as you say, outside of the visually impaired community, nobody really knows what it is or how it behaves. Whereas if you're using a Braille display with a regular off-the-shelf PC or Mac or something, then that's much more familiar. It's not as far distant from what everybody else is doing. Is that fair?
Yes. And they're quite a bit more expensive. Campbell has one that the school system purchased a few years ago, and it was $6,000. And I can buy her a computer and a Braille display for half that or less than half that, you know.
And have money left over to pay for training too.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Hey, thank you so much. What
I
else?
also can't. I would also add with the Braille note takers that it runs on a different operating system. So how you save a file, create a file, retrieve a file, that's all a learning curve for both the teacher of the visually impaired to teach the student. So I just think it's kind of a waste of time to be working on if they can do that already on a Windows-based computer.
Right.
That's really great. Thank you. Are there other things that you particularly want to say to other parents, Liza, that it's important for them to know about enabling your child, not only for high school, but also for life?
I think so. I think independence has always been our ultimate goal for Campbell, so that she can do whatever she wants to do. I was told when she was in preschool that she didn't have enough bruises because I wasn't letting her fall enough when she was old. So we had an evaluation done, and all these specialists that work with the visually impaired looked at her and said she doesn't have near enough bruises for a visually impaired 2-year-old. So we learned early on that we were being a little too overprotective, I guess. And it's very hard to step back as a parent. And even just little things, like she was trying to purchase a Spanish book the other day, and I could have done it in 30 seconds, but she was having to put in debit card information, all this stuff. And this pop-up kept coming up and telling her that, you know what, the one that tells you that the USPS prefers your address without this little dash in it or something.
Oh, yes.
And it kept coming up, and her JAWS wasn't reading it, you know, and she was like, I don't understand, Mom. It's not. She had been working on it. She's so diligent that she'll just keep doing it before she asks for help. And I think, is this the time that I step in and say, hey, this pop-up's coming up, or what would you do if you were in your dorm and Mom wasn't there? You know, well, it's a fine line that we walk, you know.
Yeah.
When to help and when not to help. And it's the same with my sighted daughter too. I mean, we're all guilty of being helicopter parents sometimes, you know. Go ahead.
I think when you think about helping anyone in any situation, whether that person is blind or sighted, you always want to begin with the end in mind. So you can think, okay, I can take care of this problem for them right now. But what if it comes back? They're not going to have any idea how to take care of it themselves. But if there's a problem that's coming up and you've been working at it, and maybe it's something that you don't see very often, sometimes it is okay to, you know, just say, I'll take care of this right now. Or say there's a situation where a blind student knows how to do something, or a blind person in general, but it would be a little bit quicker for the sighted person to do it in, say you're in a hurry or something like that. It may be better at that time for someone else to do it for you, just because that's not necessarily the skill you're trying to teach at the moment.
Right.
So you kind of have to distinguish between teaching moments and moments when it's not really necessary to teach, which those may not come up too often, but they do come up.
So what did you do with the 9-digit zip?
Well, with the zip code, I ended up having to explain it to her, like what the problem was. And from now on, don't type your address with that little dash in there. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. We'll see.
Yeah, credit cards don't like 9-digit zips. That's right.
Yeah.
They don't justify them. So yes, you're absolutely right. Health and safety, I always step in, but beyond that, you have to really hold yourself back and say, do I really need to? Will it be helpful if I help, or is it more helpful if I don't help today?
Right. And I've learned as a homeschool mom, don't try to have those teachable moments when everybody's emotional or in a hurry or trying to get out of the house, or, you know, those are not the times when it's a good thing to break down things into steps and try to teach something. And because we do everything here, every subject plus daily living skills plus,
Yeah.
emotional support, everything in our home as homeschoolers, we have to, weigh that a lot. Is this the time for this, or should we just try to get out of the house and not be late to where we're going?
Joyce, one of the things I've noticed that during this March through July timeframe really was that Liza and Campbell, because of homeschooling, have researched and Googled so much information that the average parent who sends their child who's blind visually impaired to mainstream school didn't know about. They don't do that kind of research at the level of orientation, mobility, or independent living skills, or as Campbell and Liza say, those teachable moments at home. They think, well, that'll be done at school. So when March through July, I know in Club Vibes, I was constantly calling some of the other parents saying, Liza recommends this, Liza recommends that. And, it really was super helpful that Campbell and Liza have been kind of walking this path for a while. That really did help a lot of our folks more, even those who weren't students, finding out about some resources that would benefit us. So research online, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of material. There's a lot of Facebook groups that have great information for parents. Is that not right, Liza?
Yeah.
And for students as well.
Yeah. I'm so thankful for technology gets a bad rap, and social media does too, but it's a different world than when Campbell was first diagnosed, and she was the first blind person I'd ever met. So I didn't have any support. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I had a TVI that came in once a week, for 30 minutes to try to walk me through some stuff, but it's not the same as talking to other parents. And I finally found a Yahoo group when she was about 5 or 6 years old. And it was amazing. And that was before, Facebook and all that. And we just, it's one of those email lists. So you get topics all day long, and my email was constantly going off. But it was amazing for me that I had that kind of support. Halfway across the world was another parent with a kid with the same condition. And at that point, we were still looking for a diagnosis and that kind of stuff too. So, when she was small. So it would have been nice to have back then. I'm really excited for new parents as they come in and they have this support system, with social media and all that.
Campbell, you mentioned student support with Facebook and things also, or groups. What sort of things? I mean, again, if you don't use Windows or use smart devices, that would leave someone who's blind visually impaired out. You're a member of some social groups, correct?
A few, yes. I'm on the National Association of Blind Students mailing list, which is the mailing list for the student division of the National Federation of the Blind. And then I'm in a couple of other Facebook groups that are, like there's one that's a blind and visually impaired college resource group that a friend of mine started, where it's blind and visually impaired high school students, college students, and those who've already been through college. We kind of just share ideas and resources. And then I'm also in a Facebook group for blind performing arts people, which is kind of cool because, you can talk about learning pieces in foreign languages and how to get audio recordings and stuff like that. And then there are also some really good YouTube channels, that you can find that address assistive technology and daily living skills and stuff like that.
There's wonderful podcasts out there for trainings on certain new devices that you might get. So I highly recommend that parent research, right? And know what's out there for the child or for even the young adult to start learning themselves through the use of the computer.
Right. Yeah. And we definitely depend on that a lot in our home because mom does not remember everything she learned through school. And Campbell takes classes that I never even took. So we have to use a lot of YouTube and Khan Academy and things like that to learn all kinds of things. And, for her Spanish class, there was a verb tense that she hadn't learned yet that was on the syllabus that she needed to know before she went into that Spanish class. So we just YouTubed it, you know, and there was a whole lesson about that verb tense. So, I mean, it's not just for blind people, for everybody. You can
Yeah.
YouTube just about anything.
Right, right. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I've learned a lot myself. And I know that there are other parents out there who will very much appreciate what you're talking about. And Campbell, maybe you and I can talk another time about using telephones, using smartphones. So
Yeah, that would be good.
that would be great. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.